Hey everyone, it's Zohran. Today we have Rima Begum. She's a tenant organizer here in Queens and founded the Bangladeshi Tenants Union, which is helping many of our neighbors navigate this crisis right now. Rima, can you talk about BTU and why it was so important to establish?
Yeah, hi everyone, it's Rima. So the importance of us launching the Bangladeshi Tenant Union is because we realized that there was definitely a lack of access for a lot of Bangladeshi Americans. One in particular, just systemic access, right? We all know that there is a lot of red tape around systems, but two, also navigating all of that through language. So we know that DHCR and HPD do a hard job at translating information in ways that are digestible for our community. So oftentimes they're left out trying to figure out the system, either being lucky and being connected to an organization, or sometimes just trying to figure it out with their kids who maybe translate for them.
And so, you're talking about these kinds of particular ways in which Bangladeshi tenants are specifically vulnerable, language access, and the ways in which our city and state have failed on that. In this moment of the corona pandemic, do you find that it is hitting those same tenants especially hard?
Absolutely. So this past Monday, I actually went on Time Television to talk about the issues that people are facing with their ability to pay rent in general, but also how much this whole virus has amplified that. We know that there is a system that's broken, that's unjust, and it seems like during times of crisis, it hits those vulnerable population even more. There's widespread panic, not just like, I'm afraid to get COVID, but widespread panic of what do I do? Do I feed my kids? Do I go buy this medicine? Or do I pay rent?
And what are the kinds of responses that you've received after you went on time about speaking about that?
That people are definitely in support of a rent suspension or a rent freeze, that it makes sense. I know that there was a lot of confusion around, what are essential workers and what are non-essential workers. And a lot of our folks are, a part of the non-essential workers. There are many that are, and they're continuing to work. We know probably at a limited capacity, so employers have cut down on the number of employees, and in some cases have even cut wages, right? Because they themselves are not earning as much. And for folks like my brother-in-law who are Uber drivers, right? They're not necessarily being forced to stop, but no one's in the street for them to pick up or to do work for, right? And so they end up becoming in a very sticky situation because they're not folks that work for a company that can get unemployment very quickly. It's hard to navigate that system. And then they're not technically considered essential workers either, right? So they've had to shut down. Many folks have not been working since, I would say, late February, actually. And I think a lot of people think that since the government shut down, that that's when the start of this whole, issue started, but it really started previously to that, right? It started, I would say, late February. Um, and so most folks were able to pay for March. Some actually were not even able to pay for March. And so now that rippling effect into April, and we're going to see a huge effect in May.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about this impact and you know Bangladeshi Tenants Union and kind of the fears of tenants at large. Speaking specifically about BTU, are BTU members tenants of a specific set of buildings?
So a majority of them are Zara tenants.
Okay.
So Zara Realty out in Jamaica. We do have some buildings that we work in that are not Zara buildings, but are also well organized. We have one particular building that actually we know for a fact in doing research that the landlord owes no mortgage. They have not had a mortgage in, I would say, about 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's a prime example of a building that's well organized that could do a rent strike and be very successful. So that's kind of our strategy right now, that if um, the governor, who's like paying no mind to renters right now, and using the excuse of the health crisis, which we all get, and there's still another crisis, right? Which was a housing crisis that existed before this happened. and is just now being amplified. And so we are preparing, the Bangladeshi Tenant Union is preparing for a rent strike.
Okay. And is that a strike that would happen across multiple buildings, or specifically in these ones that you identify as not having mortgages?
In multiple buildings. So we know that Zara owns 50 buildings, right? It's a part of their portfolio. And so they make a lot of money. They make money on a regular basis, right? We're not talking about a small mom and pop that owns 6 units. We're talking about a corporation. In corporations, as we saw, you know, with the stimulus package that just got passed, they're getting way more money than we are. They're the ones that are getting bailed out. The American people are not the ones being bailed out. And so a rent strike could really be effective during these times.
And what are you advising your tenants to do on April 1st?
To sustain from paying their rent, to focus on using their money, whatever little they have left, on food and medicine, because that's what really matters, is that we are staying alive at this point.
And in terms of a larger citywide and statewide specifically set of policies that would alleviate this crisis, what do you believe we need right now, and what do you believe we need in the long term?
So right now we definitely need rents and mortgages to be suspended, because we also understand that single family homeowners are kind of in the same bracket, right? They don't have additional income. They are usually the only person that, you know, pays their mortgage. We know that there is a policy that needs to be passed, because we know that, you know, even if Rebney one day just called us, the real estate board of New York just called us and said, hey, you know, we're not gonna take rent. We know that not all landlords are gonna follow that, right? Because it's not a mandate from the state, which is really important as to why we really need to ask our elected officials of this really tough question, which is that renters can't afford to pay $2,100 for the studio apartment in Astoria, Queens, where you live, right? Same thing in Jamaica. It's not a one-sided story. We're all facing the same issues, right? I'm a homeowner of a single-family homeowner house, and how am I going to be able to afford a mortgage of $3,300 now that my brother-in-law is not working, right? Our income is now supported on one income versus two before. So the sustainability of it is not going to happen for, I would say, more than a month or two. And from what reports are telling us, we know that this pandemic is going to continue for months, right? And if the pandemic continues for months and we're not going to work for months, the economy is going to take much longer to revive. It may take us more than a year to revive back, to go back to normal.
And so you want to see a suspension of both rent and mortgage payments for single-family homeowners throughout the duration of the pandemic?
Absolutely. Until we get a clear-cut answer from the governor, I wouldn't say the president, the governor, on that we are in the clear, everyone can go outside, right, and go about their business. Until that happens, we need to have a rent cancellation.
And just to be very clear about a rent cancellation means that the rent through the duration would not have to be paid after the pandemic, but would simply be canceled.
Right. So we haven't had a chance to talk about the eviction moratorium. So I do just want to plug that in really quickly, which is that previous to us starting the rent cancellation campaign, there was an eviction moratorium campaign, which pretty much stated that there would be a stop on any evictions, commercial renters and tenants, even foreclosures, right? The courts would close down. Because we know that thousands of people are evicted every single day, we know that the system is not set up to house those people immediately. We know that no one's showing apartments. We know that. And so that was the first step, to make sure that everyone had an ability to stay home and not be evicted the next day, right? This applies to people who have gotten a marshal's notice. Anyone after March 16th has a right to stay in their home. They should not be evicted from their home. You can go to court to file emergency repair. So that's if your ceiling is collapsing or if you're illegally locked out. Those are the only two reasons why you can go to court. That really set us up for this campaign here. Once we knew that people were able to stay in their homes, now we're able to move the campaign forward in saying why there needs to be a rent suspension. And it's so simple in concept, right? And the fact that our elected officials are just um, running around in circles trying to figure this thing out. None of us are earning income. If we're not earning income, we cannot participate in an economy. The economy does not exist right now. And so who is that cash supposed to go to? Because it's not going to circulate back to any of us. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. No, that answers, like, in terms of the short term, in terms of the medium term, and then after this pandemic is done, what would you like to see the state do to resolve this housing crisis that existed prior to this moment?
Fund our housing, right? Put funding into NYCHA housing. Really look at those policies that we're talking about that are really going to curb displacement. Look at good cause eviction. Look at the MCI bill. We've been working on this for many years, for decades, you know. We did have a big win last year, but that's not going to stop us from saying, okay, well, now we're safe on housing and we're just going to go about our business. We know that there are still loopholes in the law that exist. It was already a crumbling system. If we look at NYCHA housing, we're already facing issues of repairs, of heat, hot water. And so now that's just going to be amplified even more. And so really we need the money in housing specifically.
Okay. Well, Rima, thank you so much for joining us. And again,
Thank
this is
you.
Rima Begum from the Bangladeshi Tenants Union, whose work is fantastic, and you should definitely check out. It's on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook.
Thank you.